The Notes app for iPad is way more powerful and capable than you might think, and it can absolutely hold its own against a number of paid note-taking apps that are available on the App Store. But like any app, you need to know how to use it to get the most out of it. I've already made a Notes tutorial video which I'll link to in the description of this video, but that was aimed more at the Mac version of Notes, and there are some pretty significant differences between that and the iPad version. So in this video, I'll take you all the way through creating and managing notes on the iPad. I'm using an 11-inch iPad Pro with the Apple Pencil for this, but everything that I talk about here should be applicable to pretty much any iPad out there, provided it's running the latest iPad OS, which is 15.3.1. Okay, let's get into it. Let's start by ensuring that you understand how the different parts of the note screen work and what they do. I'm using the app in landscape mode, by the way. The same things would apply in portrait mode. It's just easier to show you what's going on if I have this in landscape mode. Fundamentally, Notes gets broken down into two menus and the note itself, although you'll see that those menus appear and disappear as we jump from navigating around the app to actually working in a note. So here, for example, I've got a note open. It's this Chinese chicken tray bake recipe note, and it's over here on the right. If I tap on the note, the column on the left disappears, and the note now takes up 3/4 of the screen. On the left is the folder that we're currently in, a recipes folder that I've made. If I tap the folders button up at the top left, the left column, the folders column will appear again. If I tap back into the note to make the folders menu disappear, I can then tap this button at the top left to make the note go full screen, getting rid of both the folders menu and the recipes folder itself, allowing me to focus on just the note that I'm currently looking at. Pressing that same button again will bring this recipes folder back into play, and pressing the folders button takes us back to where we started. That's essentially how you navigate around the Notes app at a high level, so take a moment to get used to that structure. The exact same thing works in portrait mode as well as landscape mode, it just looks a little bit different. Down at the bottom left of the screen, you have a folder icon with a plus on it, which is the button you use to create a new folder. Tapping that will give me the option of creating a new folder or creating a new smart folder. I'll explain smart folders once we get into note management. Choosing to create a new folder, I can type out a name for it on the on-screen keyboard and then save it, and it's created as a new folder and is showing in the folders bar on the left. So we now understand the basics of navigating around the app. Let's take a look at how to create a note. You can move notes later on if you need to, but the best way to think about the Notes app is to consider where you'd like to store the note you're about to create first, then navigate to that place. So I've created a folder called Sample Folder for this video. I'll tap into that. You can see that it's empty, and you can see that the folders menu has hidden itself away. But we now also have a number of buttons up here in the top right of the screen. This is a tiny bit confusing because the last button on the right is the new Note button, but Notes works by loading up the most recent note in the folder that you're in, and as we don't have one, it's actually gone ahead and created a new blank note for us, which you can see here. All you have to do is tap your finger anywhere in this empty note, and the note is ready for us to begin editing. So the keyboard appears, and as we type, we start off typing the title of the note. I'll tap enter. You only need to tap it once, although I usually tap it twice to give me some space, and then we can begin typing out the actual note. There's nothing particularly special here. You would type out a note just as you would if you were typing out an email or pretty much anything else with your iPad. In the bar just above the keyboard to the right of the screen, you have a couple of buttons. The table button will create a simple 2x2 table in your note. You can tap at the top of columns or at the side of rows to bring up the option to add columns and rows as needed. One thing to point out is that this is pretty basic. We're not talking Excel here. You can't use formulas or add up rows or anything like that. This is very much a basic table for you to manually input data into, although you can input letters and numbers. It would be great if Apple could implement some of the functionality of the Numbers app here in the future. If you tap to select the table, notice how the table icon here changes. You can tap here and either copy the table, share the table, convert the table to text, or delete the table. To the right of the table button, you've got the text format button. Here you can choose various different text formatting options like title, heading, subheading, and body. You can make text bold, italic, underlined, or use strike through, and you can create various types of indentations, such as bullets, numbered bullets, and indenting left and right. You can tap any of these options, and whatever you type will then be in that format, or you can type something, select it, and apply the formatting. Up at the top of the note, we've got some options. You've got a to-do list option, allowing you to create subtasks within your notes. You can't unfortunately apply dates here or reminders or anything like that. It's another area where the Notes app is a little bit behind some third-party apps. I'd love to see Apple integrate Notes, Calendar, and Reminders together in a future iOS. If you tap the camera option, you can input an image. If I choose Scan Documents, I can use my iPad to scan a document. I typically recommend putting the document down on a contrasting color surface like a dark table or carpet if you know you've got a white document, for example, and the iPad is pretty good at figuring out the best way to scan your document. You can see that once a document is scanned, the iPad will usually then be able to draw some information from the text, and if you tap into the image, you can add more pages to it if it's a multi-page document, you can crop it, you can change the color mode of it, you can rotate it, or you can delete it. You can also share it by tapping the share button up at the top right of the screen, and the fantastic thing about this is that it will automatically create a PDF. You can also use markup on the document, which is where you can use the Apple Pencil or your finger to add annotations to it. I'll cover markup separately when we talk about Apple Pencil. Back in the camera icon, you can also take a photo using your iPad and add that to the note, or you can select a photo from your camera roll. Jumping back into the note, we have the Apple Pencil icon. Like I say, we'll circle back to that in a moment, and then this ellipsis or hamburger menu, whatever you call it, which gives us some options. We can scan an image in, like we just did, or we can delete the note using the delete button. Pin will pin this note to the top of the folder. This is handy once you start to create a lot of notes within a folder. There might be some really important ones that you want to always have visible at the top of the folder, and using this pin function will allow you to do just that. Lock will allow you to lock the contents of the note and assign it to either a password or the biometrics of your device, so Face ID for this iPad Pro, yours might have Touch ID. The contents of the note will be locked, which means that people can only access the contents of the note by unlocking it, but also the contents won't show in a preview. It creates a padlock icon up at the top of the note, and tapping that will lock the note. Tapping it again will unlock the note once I've input my biometrics, of course, and back in the menu I have the option to remove the lock if I wish. I can send a copy of the note, which will send a copy of the contents of the note to someone. This is different to sharing a note. Sharing relies on the person you're sending it to also having Apple Notes and allows them to collaborate with you on the note. Sending a copy is kind of like saying, here's a copy of all this information I have within this note, which you can then email to someone. You can search within the note using Find in Note. You can move the note using the Move button, allowing you to shift it over to a different folder. Lines and grids is honestly only really useful here on the iPad in my opinion, even though this function exists on both the iPhone and Mac version of Notes. It creates lines and grids like you'd gone to the shops and bought a notepad, and you can then use the Apple Pencil to write or draw using those lines and grids as a reference. If you want to remove the lines and grids, head back into the menu and tap the Clear Note button to do this. Print will allow you to print out your note. So I figured I'd bunch all of the parts related to Apple Pencil together, so if you don't own an Apple Pencil, you're welcome to skip to the next chapter, or you can keep watching and see what all the fuss is about. I've put timestamps in the video and the description. The first feature related to Apple Pencil and Notes is that if your iPad is currently in sleep mode, you can tap on it using the Apple Pencil. It will wake up with a brand new note, ready for you to begin using the pencil. This is great if you, for example, jot down handwritten notes using your iPad and pencil. You've just run into a meeting and you want to start taking notes immediately, not having to mess around with launching the app, creating a new note, etc. Notice that the pen icon is highlighted up the top, and down here at the bottom left we have a pencil with an A on it. That's the Scribble icon, telling us that we're now using Scribble. Scribble is available all over iPadOS, but we'll focus on it here in Notes for this video. If you have Scribble activated and you jot something out in your handwriting, your iPad will automatically convert it into computer text for you. Scribble out a word to delete it, and so long as the cursor is now where that word was, handwrite a replacement word, and that word will go over the top of it. Draw a line under some text or a circle around it to select it, and you can then use regular text formatting using your finger to make things bold or underlined, etc. Draw a vertical line upwards between characters to remove the space. Draw a vertical line downwards to input a space. Double tap on a word to select that word. Triple tap on a word to select a paragraph. Annoyingly, there's no pencil shortcut to hit the return key. To do that, you'll need to tap the scribble icon, and it's down here at the bottom right. You can also access an on-screen keyboard here, input a table, and access text formatting. The ellipsis or burger menu to the right lets you choose whether to auto-minimize this menu or not, whether to allow draw with finger. The remainder of the scribble menu focuses on the various types of on-screen pens and pencils you can use. For example, the first option is kind of like a felt tip pen. You can change the color, and if you tap and hold it for a second, you can change both the thickness and the opacity of the pen. Notice as I change these, a number appears on the icon to illustrate the opacity level, and a little color band appears to illustrate the thickness of the tip. Once you get to know how this works, you'll know exactly what you're selecting without having to go into the menu. Next up is the highlighter. Same concept applies as the felt tip pen. To the right of that is the pencil, and you can see that you can shade on the screen like you would with a pencil, which is pretty cool. Next up is the eraser, which won't work on computer text, but will work on any drawings or highlights you've created. On the Apple Pencil, if you double tap on the flat part of the pencil, you can jump between the last selected pen or pencil and the eraser, which is useful. Then the next icon is the selection tool. Tap this, then draw around something you've drawn in your note to select it, and then move it around as you need to. The ruler icon creates a virtual ruler on your screen, which you can move around and position using 2 fingers. You can then draw up against that ruler, and notes will help you create straight lines. Okay, so we now know how to create notes the conventional way, but what if we want to integrate notes with some other apps? The iPad offers a couple of ways to do this, one which is pretty unique to the iPad. The first method is to use the share function within an app. So here, for example, in this news article, if I tap on the ellipsis or burger menu, I can choose share and then choose notes from the available apps. I can save this as a new note and choose where I'd like that note to be saved to, and I can add some text to the note. If I then save the note and head to the Notes app, you can see my note, complete with the text that I wrote, and a link to the news article. This works in loads of apps like Safari, Mail, Maps, so loads of places that you would be able to use this to quickly capture a note. Another option on iPad is to create a quick note. Let's go to Safari this time, and let's jump to a news article. Then I'm going to swipe up and into the screen from the bottom right corner of the display. This will open up the Quick Notes function. By default, it's going to look to add to the note that I've most recently been working on, but if I want a new note, I just tap this new note function here. I can then scribble or type in some text, and if I hit the add link button, it will link to what I was viewing when I made the quick note. This is awesome if you want to use your iPad to do some research away from your desk. You can still create really rich, detailed notes. If I now head to Quick Notes in my Notes app, you can see the notes that I've just created. Cool, right? This is also available on Mac, by the way, but no sign of it yet on iPhone, which is kind of a shame. I know it's a smaller screen, but I still think it could be made to work. The third way that you can integrate with Notes is via multitasking. So let's jump back to that article. Let's say that rather than taking a link to the article, I want to grab the image from it and put it into a new note. Tap the 3 dots at the top of the screen, and then tap the left-hand button to position Safari, in this instance, on the left half of the screen. Then tap on Notes on the homepage to open that up in the other half of the screen. I'm going to create a new note, input some text, and then I'm going to tap and hold the image for a second, then drag it across to my note. It's that easy to save images to your notes. It works for a load of other things too, although it can take some practice to get it right. Let's open Twitter, for example. You can drag a tweet into a note, but I've noticed that to do it, you have to tap and hold on the avatar of the person who wrote the tweet and drag it that way. So we've covered the creation of notes now in a number of different ways. At some point, you're going to have to get into the habit of managing and organizing your notes, otherwise you're going to be left with a folder full of messy, disorganized notes. First up, looking at the folder structure, you can see that Apple gives you a section for your cloud notes, iCloud in my case. You can have notes here across multiple different accounts if you wish. For example, I could go to settings and then switch on notes for my proper Honest Tech email account, and I'd then have a separate section for notes here. I guess you could use this if you want to be able to separate your notes out for different purposes. Perhaps have an entire dedicated notes section for your work, one for your personal, although you can kind of do this anyway using folders, so that's why I only really use iCloud personally. Notes is kind of like an inbox. Notes that you create by default will go in there, ready for you to organize them away. To move a note to a folder, tap on the ellipsis menu and choose Move Note, or swipe from right to left, bringing up these swipe options: Share, Move, and Delete. Tapping the middle button will bring up a list of all of your folders, and you can then decide where to put this note. You can create folders like we talked about earlier on. It's the button in the bottom left. You can then create folders within folders. So for example, if I tap the New Folder button and create a new folder, it will by default be created at the top level of the folder structure. But then if I select it and choose this ellipsis burger menu at the top of the folder, you can see that in this list of options, one of them is to move this folder. I can move it into another folder if I wish, creating a nest of folders. This is obviously helpful if you want to have, say, a personal folder, a work folder, and then branch off into more specific folders within each. While we're here, let's take a moment to explore that ellipsis burger menu for a moment. You can choose to view your folders and notes as either a list or a gallery. Gallery gives you a visual representation of the notes, so that's good if you're operating more of a visual notes folder and you'd like to be able to see things with a bit more of an image focus rather than simply a text focus. Share folder works just like Share Note. You can share the entire folder of notes with someone and allow them to join you and collaborate on all of the contents of that folder. So if I tap this, down at the bottom I have share options. The people I add can make changes, or they can view only, and I can toggle whether people can add other people. The example I always give here is a family planning a trip. Everyone could take notes and add them in here, but there's a bunch of ways that you could use this. Select Notes lets you bulk select notes to then perform an action on them, like deleting a number of them at the same time. Sort Notes lets you sort the notes, and you can sort them by date edited, date created, or title, choosing newest to oldest or vice versa. You can add a folder directly within this folder. This just lets you skip the part where you create a top level folder and then move it. It's a shortcut for creating a new folder in here essentially. You can rename the folder, and you can view all of the attachments in a visual form. Weirdly, no matter where you are, Notes shows you all of the attachments across the whole of Notes. It would make more sense to me if it just focused on the attachments in the folder you're in, but there you go. Okay, final thing to talk about then is hashtags and smart folders. Hashtags are new to Notes, but not new in general, and if you're already familiar with hashtags, you no doubt understand the concept. When creating a note, add a hashtag somewhere in the note. If you want to include more than one word in the hashtag, either bunch them together like a Twitter hashtag or use underscores instead of spaces. When you've created your hashtag, hit return on your keyboard, and when you see it go yellow, you know you've created it correctly. Head back to the main menu, and our hashtag is now visible. Tapping on it will immediately bunch together all notes within that hashtag. So if you're moving house, for example, and you've got 3 or 4 folders dedicated to the move, and perhaps you're creating notes that have some relevant to the house move but not entirely, you could add a hashtag house move to the note, and that would be a quick way of viewing all of the relevant notes. Hashtags are that easy, and you can add multiple hashtags to notes if you wish. Now with hashtags covered, let's talk smart folders for a second. A smart folder is a folder that you create and assign a rule to when you create it, and that rule is applied to notes already within the Notes app, but also any notes that you create moving forward. So if I tap on the option to create one, you can see that once I've named it, I can add hashtags that I'd like to be covered by this new rule, and I can create a new hashtag if I wish. Once created, any notes within the Notes app that match my rule will be added to the folder, and any new ones I create will automatically go into this folder. So let's say, for example, that I'm buying a car and I'm doing research and I create a smart folder with the hashtag new car. Any notes I create moving forward with that hashtag will automatically go into that folder. My only complaint about smart folders is that once created, you can't nest them into other folders, which is a shame. Perhaps that could come in a future update. So there you go, a pretty in-depth look at the Notes app for iPad. What do you think? Do you use the Notes app on your iPad? Any useful features that I've not mentioned? Or if you don't use the Notes app, what do you use instead? Drop me a comment and let's talk about it. And as ever, if you found this video useful, do please consider leaving me a like and subscribing to my channel for more content like this in the future. See you on the next video.